Villagers are one of the most rewarding things to work with in Minecraft. Unfortunately, they're also one of the most complicated things to figure out. So this video is created to help people figure out some of the basics when dealing with villagers so they can have a nice time on their own and really make the most out of them. The first thing that you need to know when dealing with villagers is how to get villagers in the first place. Now, for most of us, this is pretty easy. You usually find a village early on in your survival world, which does cause a few problems though when it's too early on, since sometimes when you find them you aren't able to use them right away, and then by the time that you are ready to use them, most of the villagers end up dead. Because of this, I would highly recommend right when you find a village, first thing that you need to do is go around and block off all the doors to lock villagers into any house that they're in. This will just make sure that they survive for when you're ready to use them. Now, I realize most people aren't lucky enough to find a village close enough to their base. So you do have another option when it comes to getting villagers, and that is to find zombie villagers out at night. Once you find them, basically you'll need 2 of them to convert into villagers to start a breeder. But basically, once you find them, you want to go create a pretty easy to build pit, blocks above it to make sure they don't die in the sunlight, and then go shift over on the opposite edge that they're on so that they end up falling into it. And once you have 2, you can start the process of curing, which all you really need is a golden apple for each and a splash potion, depending on whether you're doing them both at the same time or one at a time. You may need up to 2 splash potions. But basically, they'll start the converting process and you'll be able to get some villagers easily enough. Now, the next thing that you'll need to know for villagers is how to move them around. Since villagers like to just randomly move around, it's really helpful to be able to control where they go and get them where you want to pretty effectively. The main 2 ways that people do this is, the first one is if you're just going across a flat space, is just to use a boat. Since you can put something in and also drive the boat, it makes it pretty easy, albeit a pretty slow method of getting a villager from one place to another. It's quite effective over short ranges, and if you want a lot of control on where you want to go. If you're needing to use the same path over and over again, it's usually best to use a powered rail so that you don't need to worry too much about whether or not the rail is going. But if you only need to move villagers for a one-time experience, for example, if you just need to get a lot of villagers from one place to another, using a minecart with a furnace just over basic rails, you can just power it up and it'll go push villagers and whatever else you want along really easily along a one-time track. Now, there is one small problem with boats, and that's their inability to go uphill. This is pretty easy to solve. All you need is a piston and a lever, and you can drive your boat onto the piston, flick it up, hop back into the boat, and drive on your merry way. It's a little bit tedious having to go back and also break the piston and the lever each time, but it will get the job done, especially over just a little bit over 1 or 2 times. But overall, if you have the resources, it's definitely better to be using a rail setup. If you don't have the resources, oh well. But these are the 2 main ways that you can move villagers around pretty easily. The next thing that you need to know for villagers is how to create a villager breeder. This is really important since you never have enough villagers to begin with, and you can always use more. The main thing about a villager breeder is it comes in a few parts. There's a lot of different ways that you can build it, all of which work basically the same way. So the first part is you'll need a farm area. You'll need the villagers to have a pretty good source of food. The best way to do this is just to provide them with farmland. Have 1 farmer villager, so have a composter. You could have 2, and then 2 villagers, so you'll need also a bed for each villager. So this is the main part of the villager breeder. And basically they'll be able to farm the farmland, and once they have enough food from that, they'll be able to create another baby. That's assuming the second part of the villager is intact, which we'll cover now. The next part of the breeder basically just adds a few more beds so that there is enough beds for the villagers to want to make more babies, but sectioned off in a way that when the baby villagers go to sleep, they'll walk over. These trapdoors will be, first one will be placed like that so they think they can walk over it. And then the second one will be placed just on top of it to prevent them from actually getting in. And basically what this will do is they'll come over looking for a bed, and then walk under this, and then get flown over into using water streams into your collection area. It doesn't have to be built exactly like that. There's many different methods that you can use to separate out the adult villagers from baby villagers. But the main thing is having a way that only baby villagers can get into, so you don't end up losing any of your adult villagers. And the best way to do this, I've found, is just to have half slabs above and then trapdoors like that, so that the baby villagers end up getting collected in an area. The area that you build can look however you want, but these are the basic parts of a villager breeder. Now, the next thing villagers are really good at is making an iron farm. So there's the iron farms are really complicated to make if you don't know how, and following guides online isn't always the best, especially when you can just learn how the spawning mechanics work and just build your own. So the first thing that you'll need to know about making an iron golem farm is that it requires a village. A village in Minecraft is defined as, or at least for the sake of spawning iron golems, 3 villagers who are able to sleep. They need to have slept during the last night or one of the previous ones. So making sure that they have beds available to them nearby enough so that they can sleep is really important. Next thing that is important to making an iron golem farm is scaring the villagers using a zombie. When villagers are scared, they will summon an iron golem if they haven't seen one in the last 30 seconds. So it's quite important to have a zombie within range to scare them. It's also really good to bear in mind that they still need to be able to sleep. So you need to make some way for the zombie to lose sight of them to allow them time to go to bed really quickly during the night. It doesn't need to be for long. They just need to get into bed, and it'll refresh them to be able to spawn another iron golem. This is the most complicated version of it. All I'm doing to make it bob up and down is using flowing water on top of a fence post, as you can see there. So it's nothing too complicated. Once you have the zombie and the village in place, all that really matters now is to make sure that that you can actually kill the iron golem. To do this, usually you create a platform that it can spawn on with water on it, since iron golems can spawn in water. And then once the iron golem spawns, it spawns on the platform and then flows over into a death chamber. You do need to make sure that there's no other blocks anywhere nearby for it to spawn on. Get high up away from other solid blocks, and making sure that you slab the top of every other exposed blocks, or use something like glass that iron golems can't spawn on. Now, the last thing I'll be covering in this guide is villager trading. Although this appears to be very simple on the surface, actually getting into it, it does get actually pretty difficult, since you don't want to be trading for the max price, since it's pretty easy to get things down. And once you get all the trades down to one per one, or in some cases 1 per 18, it can really start to add up and give you a lot of benefits. The biggest question is, how do you get cheaper prices with villagers? There are lots of different ways, but the easiest way to exploit and get lower prices is usually just to get a zombie to go kill the villager, and then once the villager is killed, go and heal that villager to make it back into a villager using the curing process I covered earlier. And then once the villager is cured, you can go in and check the prices, and you'll notice that all the prices have dropped by a considerable amount. This is really kind of what you want. You're able to get really good prices on really good items, and can really help out, especially with enchanted books, which usually cost a lot in librarians. Now, of course, this method, as done here with just one villager, is pretty easy to do with one villager. Not much thought. You get a zombie and then you heal it up. But once you start working with multiple villagers, it starts to get lots and lots more difficult to manage curing and restoring villagers. So you really need to get a setup for it, in which you can control which villagers get zombified and curing them. And I know that many people prefer to zombify their villagers before getting them into the trading hall, since this basically allows you to have really cheap prices right up at the beginning. But the way I like to do it is have the zombification built into the trading hall, where you can just select a villager to get dropped down, and then the villager will get zombified, and then you can go through the process of curing just inside of the trading hall itself. This allows you to see prices see the prices at the same time you're doing it, and only do as many villagers as you need. Since some villagers only require 1 or 2 zombifications, while many others require many more, like 5 or 6. But this is just my standard layout that I use for most of my zombification. Now the using of the setups is pretty easy. All you need is a rail system from your villager breeder or villager store. Stop it next to its job site, and then break and replace the job site until its trades that it has are satisfactory. And at which point you can just send it on its merry way, and it'll eventually get into the system. This rail system is completely up to you. You can design however you want. But yeah, it's a pretty simple system. Now the system itself to do the zombification is pretty easy. Basically all you need to do is have a little setup with a note block and an observer that basically just detects every time this the lever is flicked and drops or puts back up the trapdoor. Not too difficult there. The top system is also really easy. You can just use a lever to have a block push so they can no longer fall down in the spot once one's already in there. The top system is pretty easy to just eyeball it yourself if you don't know how. And then having a zombie in the back just one lower, so that when they're dropped, the zombie can pathfind onto it. All in all, it's a pretty easy thing to build, and you can actually design it however you want. If you'd prefer some different way to put them in, or some different way of zombifying, you can pretty easily do that. All you need to know is that zombifying really does help your prices get cut down a lot. Instead of paying 48 for Unbreaking 3, you can just be paying 3 or even 1 if you do it again. And with that, that should be the last thing you really need to know for dealing with villagers. Hopefully this guide isn't too long-winded or overly complicated. It's more of not meant to be a specific thing for how to deal with villagers, but more of just the simple, small things that you need to understand with villagers before you get started. If you're looking for comprehensive guides, there's lots of other comprehensive guides to villager breeders, trading halls, and also iron farms all online. So if you want, you can just go search for those. As I said, this video is mostly just to give you an understanding of everything that there is, rather than how to specifically build all of it. And with that, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video.